Well, the investor was very impressed with a AAA rating from a company like Moody's, owned by Warren Buffett. If anything should generate confidence. But that wasn't enough. They took a final step. They attached to each of these pools of mortgages an insurance policy. I kid you not. Not only did it come with a AAA rating, but it came attached to an insurance policy in which an insurance company said, if any one of the 1,000 people whose mortgages are in this pool should come upon hard times and be unable to make the monthly payment, we, the insurance company, will make the payment. See, no risk at all. And this was not just any insurance company. The leader in the United States to write these policies was a corporation called AIG, American International Group, the largest insurance company on this planet. Well, now you understand why investors, why the pension fund of Pensacola, Florida, invested all the money that the policemen and women had been contributing all their lives into these wonderful investments that were AAA rated and guaranteed. What could go wrong? Well, now we know the following. Two key facts. One, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch's now admit that they weren't as careful as they should have been, and that these ratings were exaggerated. I believe that's the language, or something to that effect. They're not being prosecuted because basically they claim that the information they were provided on the basis of which they reached their judgment was itself, let's say, loose. Second, as the number of people who couldn't pay, the number of people who could not make their mortgage payments began to go crazy late in 2007 and into 2008, more and more of the investors did what, of course, you would expect them to do. They called up AIG and said, thousands of people are not making their monthly payment, pay us. And at a certain point, late in the summer of 2008, the American International Group, largest insurance company in the world, informed the Federal Reserve and the President of the United States that they could not pay off on the insurance policies they had written. At which point, everything collapsed. The American government came in and took over the AIG corporation, which the American government now owns. 80% of it is owned by the United States government. It is not a private company, it is a nationalized insurance company. Very important that you know that. The government had to come in because the value of all mortgage-backed securities, whose total value is in the trillions of dollars, were collapsing because nobody would touch this investment. There were desperate people trying to sell, nobody would buy it, and so the prices collapsed, which meant the value of everybody's pension and everything else was disappearing, and the government had to step in because of the collapse of our economy that was a matter of days or weeks away. That was the crisis of late September, October of 2008. Why were so many mortgages not paying? Now, the answer for that is simple. Once the banks understood that the money to be made was in getting someone to sign a mortgage, and then immediately you signed the mortgage, you gave them the $500,000, they bought the house. You immediately sold it to one of these mortgage poolers who gave you back your $500,000, minus a whole bunch of commissions. Now you could do the whole thing again. You'd make much more money than waiting for 20 years while the poor family made its payments. The only thing you needed, crucial now, right? Here we go. The only thing you needed was vast numbers of people who would take out mortgages. How are you going to find vast numbers of people in the United States to take out mortgages? The people who could afford mortgages already had them. You needed to market mortgages to people who hadn't had them before. Enter the mortgage broker. At the height of the boom in 2006 and 7, there were 1 million people in the United States, nearly 1 million, who listed as their occupation mortgage broker. 5 years earlier, there weren't any. Whoa, what is a mortgage broker? That's a nice name for a hustler. What this person does is the following. He or she, and I believe it's an equal opportunity enterprise, he or she cuts a deal with a local bank, or typically many local banks. And here's the deal. The bank will give the hustler $1,000, typical, for every signed mortgage that hustler brings in. You go out and find somebody, all you need is a signature that these people want a mortgage. They're going to buy a house, give them a mortgage. So the hustler goes out and he meets Mr. and Mrs. Smith. He sits in their living room. He says to them, how much are you paying for this rental that you have here? $842. Whoa, come with me. He takes them in their car, he drives them to a new part of town where houses are going up. He says, look at this house. 10 times nicer than yours. For $782 a month, I can put you in this house. And instead of paying rent to a landlord, you'll never see the money again, you're building up equity in your own home. Which would you prefer? Where can I sign? Very easy. How did you come to the 794? Well, there are whole new sets of mortgages. There's a balloon mortgage, where you pay a little at the beginning, and then the balloon blows up later. You pay more later. But the beginning is $794, and that's less than you're paying in rent. Or you have an interest-only mortgage. You don't pay back the principal, just the interest. Hundreds of new gimmicks, all having one purpose. Get the people to sign the card. The bank didn't care because they immediately sold the mortgage. The mortgage broker didn't care because he got his $1,000 each time he brought in a sucker with a signature. This was so exciting. This was making so much money for brokers and bankers that there was no limit. One of the things they became creative with was the little detail of a signature, which had to be notarized. So we had to get, this was a speedy operation. You had to play fast and loose. So the same notary would notarize, I don't know, 2, 3, 4,000 signatures a day. No one cared in those days because everybody was happy. The people were happy in their new house. They didn't know that they would go up the mortgage. The mortgage broker got his $1,000. The local bank had churned the money again. Everybody, investors were happy to get these good. Everything was wonderful. But in the course of 5 years, the United States gave mortgages to millions of people that could not possibly pay for them. It was only a matter of time. We're talking about the period 2001 to 2007, not a very long time, where you built up an overhang that could not be sustained. And when it collapsed, everything went with it. The investors lost, the banks lost, the brokers, by the way, as a profession, there's about 50,000 of them left. A million people had to find new work. All gone, finished. So bad is it that no bank will now provide a mortgage on its own in the United States. Over the last 18 months, 98% of all mortgages written in the United States were either purchased by the United States government or guaranteed. If it were not for the United States government, the value of your home would be half what it is today. That's how desperate this situation is, and there's no end in sight. Nothing has happened, except in the last month since last we met, there's been an explosion of legal problems. See, it turns out that the bank that foreclosed on the Smith family, because they didn't make their money, represented that it was there in the name of Johanna Burns, a person in Ireland who owned the investment in the mortgage pool. But it turned out that it passed through 6 hands before it got to Johanna Burns. And every transfer was notarized by a person who turns out not to have been there. That makes the foreclosure illegal. But the story's worse. After the house was foreclosed by the Jones Bank in the name of Johanna Burns, they resold the house to somebody. The Adams family. They moved in. They bought a dog. They're very happy. They've had 2 children, and they're getting a notice this week that they have 2 days to get out of there, because it's not their house, because the person who sold it to them, the bank, had not the right to do it. We're going to have court cases to clog the American court system for the next 50 years on this mess. That's why all the banks, the major banks of America, ended their foreclosure, froze everything. No foreclosures now, as we try as a nation to figure out how to unwind the catastrophe that the private market in mortgages, with its innovative new systems over the last three decades, has produced. The only thing holding it up, as usual, when the private market tanks, is the United States government. The place capitalists always go when the excrement flies into the cooling equipment.